The HBCU Legacy Bowl is this weekend. There's a couple of players who are right here, and that event can take them right over the edge. Oh yeah, it's Locked on HBCU. Play my music.
You are Locked on HBCU, your daily podcast covering HBCU sports. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, family? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked on HBCU podcast, your number one daily one-stop shop for everything HBCU athletics, Monday through Friday, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And I, of course, am Darian Gray, a.k.a. the Mouth of the South, Texas Southern alum and former TSU Herald Sports editor. Thank you for going on this journey with me, making Locked on HBCU your first listen of the day every day. And remember, just because the mic cuts off and it will cut off. Doesn't mean that the journey is over. It just means it's time to follow me on Twitter at South Exclusives. Right? I'm going to go with the other hand just to make it more. Come on. Even with the left hand, I'm still getting it. Okay. I got to do something to make this more difficult on myself. I tried going underhanded. I tried going drop hand. Ladies and gentlemen, rewind this about 5 seconds and watch it over anytime you want to find out what happens when you become more confident than you really should be. And for the audio side, just know I tried to point at my logo that I do every single show, and I failed when I was making a point. Anywho, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more when you visit the official sports book of the Locked On Podcast Network today to get started at FanDuel.com/locked on. And the HBCU Legacy Bowl is here. And I have 5 players. Let's see, I got that right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yes, why wouldn't I? Because there's nothing greater than the 5. I have 5 players who I feel are right at a certain point in this HBCU Legacy Bowl can take them to another level. Now, that other level is different for whichever player it is. It's not always the same. It's not, oh, it can take you from here to being an NFL draftee. That's not what I'm saying for all of these players. A couple of them. But for others, the next level is something a little bit different. And this is all based on what I believe their current expectations are. But they've also built up a name for themselves, and that's why I feel like they can go to the next level. Quick rule. It's kind of how I started this week's shows, where I talked about 5 players you should watch for at the HBCU Combine. None of those players are making the list. Now, here's the gig. If you want to find out who those players are, you're gonna have to go back to Monday. Xavier Smith was one of those players. I'll give you a hint, but there's 4 others that I'm gonna have to tell you to go back and listen. I will not talk about Dejon Warren because we talked about him and gave him a whole segment earlier this week, so I will not include him on this list. That's just a couple of reasons you won't see some of the names that you think should have been here. But the first name I'm gonna name is DJ Golatt, and I understand that I spoke on him earlier this week as well, but he had to share his spotlight with Xavier Smith, and I want to talk at length about what I think he can go to, or where I think he can go to. See, Golatt had a really good passing drill day. He looked good. He's credited as having the best motion mechanics, having the best ball placement of all the quarterbacks out there. He really set himself apart as the best quarterback at the Combine. That needs to continue into the Legacy Bowl. You have to make sure that you are going from the best quarterback at the Combine when we're in shorts and a shirt to being the best quarterback at the Legacy Bowl when we're in pads and a helmet. That's number one. Nothing else can happen other than that. You have to continue to turn heads in the same way. Right now, the next level is not the NFL for DJ Golatt. And I think that's a touch of realism. And I know that it may sound pessimistic, but no. If Akil Glass didn't get to the NFL, I'm sorry, the bar is high. And I don't know if anybody hits it until Darius Richard comes through. Now, maybe when Darius Richard comes out, he hits that bar. But right now, there's not a prospect who's more accomplished than Glass, who I feel like has more buzz than Glass. But I do think that the next level for Golatt is a potential XFL in 2024, a USFL invite, right? He didn't get drafted, but he has the 6-foot frame. He has the 221-pound body. This guy is going to be a good dual threat, and I think he just needs an opportunity. I think you look at the fact that at Morgan State, he didn't have years of big numbers. Then he gets to Bowie State, he has better numbers, but you want a year of refinement. And I think that he is the perfect example of a player who could potentially go from refining his skills in the USFL, XFL, whatever, and then turning that into an opportunity in the NFL. That's a great example of it. The next two players I want to name are the running backs of Emmanuel Wilson, and then also Darius Hagans. When I look at these two players amongst all the running backs, because there's a lot of talented ones, I can name Alfonso Graham, even though he was, I did. Now, I guess I gave you two freebies. He was one of the guys that I named on Monday. But if I can name Alfonso Graham, I can name Quayshawn Bird, I can name those guys. But I'm going to focus on Hagans and Wilson because these are meant for players who have built up something already, that I'm hearing the buzz for already. Golatt built that buzz at the combine. You look at Hagans, you look at Wilson, they were at the NFLPA Bowl. You don't just get to go there because you're a good person. You don't get to just go there because people said, you know what, that Wilson kid, I think he's a respectable young man. That Hagans guy, I don't know, something about him, he's charming. No, they built up a credibility on the football field that said, I'm going to bring you to one of the 3 premier pre-draft bowls that we have in the NFL draft process. That says something. So they are at a point to where they are really being considered for the NFL. I think that this event can take them over the edge to a late round draft prospect, a for sure UDFA. I think that if they perform and do really well in the HBCU Legacy Bowl, it can be that. For Wilson, we already heard, oh man, he's the most complete back at the NFLPA Bowl. I know I think a running back from TCU got a little bit of love coming out of the game. But when Maurice Jones-Drew tells me that Wilson is the most complete back at the event, I listen to that. I didn't hear much bad about Hagans coming out of the event, and I'm hearing a lot of good now. They're at a point to where we have to take some real consideration to see if they can be a real late round draft pick or maybe a UDFA that gets signed relatively quickly. Now you move into the defensive lineman. That's who I'm wrapping up with. You have Andrew Farmer, who's an absolute beast, an absolute terror, and his frame is 6'4". Reminds me kind of Deshaun Dixon, just with long arms. I think Deshaun Dixon might have been 6'4", 6'5" last year too. He ended up getting a practice squad spot. He ended up getting some snaps, I think, with the Jaguars this year, sparingly, if I'm not mistaken. But I think he was on the Jaguars roster for at least the duration of the season, and that's a win. That is a win if you get that. And when I look at Farmer, you see a guy who had 44 tackles for a loss in the last 2 years, 17 and a half sacks in the last 2 years, 6'4" frame. He has the production. He has the look. He has what you want. I don't care if this is on a D2, FCS, FBS level. I don't care. When you stand 6'4", a frame with long arms that people are going to gravitate towards, and you have that level of production, regardless of the level you're playing at, when you have that level of production, people are going to be interested. With a good HBCU Legacy Bowl, this is another guy who I think can be a UDFA player. He just got to get right over that hump. That's one thing that I think he can get to. And if you notice, all these guys have built up off of multiple years of production. That's the only difference between these guys and Golatt to me. Then lastly, you have Jordan Lewis. And Jordan Lewis is the most interesting to me because he's the only one of this list who has ever been named with the top level HBCU prospects. The only one who has ever stood toe to toe with Mark Evans and Isaiah Land and Aubrey Miller. Of these guys I named, those players just hadn't been mentioned as somebody who could have been drafted a year ago. That wasn't the case for most of these guys. Lewis was there, but Lewis has inconsistent end of the year production, but he's shown he can do it. And I just wonder, what are scouts going to focus on? Are they going to focus on the years we had sky-high sack potential? Are they going to focus on the years when it looks like he can be a legitimate pass rusher in the league? Are we going to focus on that? Are we going to focus on the down years? What's the plan here? How are we going to play it? Because if you focus on the high years and focus on the high side and the upside for him, then you might be saying, I might draft this guy. And if he blows away the NFL or the HBCU Legacy Bowl, that's the next level. He's the guy who I think he's going to be a UDFA. I think Jordan Lewis gets picked up by some team, gets to camp in some way. I think that's what happens. But he's right here. And maybe if he can just go over the edge with a dominant HBCU Legacy Bowl, I'm not just saying a good one, a dominant HBCU Legacy Bowl, you just might see Jordan Lewis get his name called. I wanted to end it with the most emphatic one. So let me know if there are any risers that I missed, anybody that you would put in there. And if you say somebody who I named on Monday's episode, I'm going to know you didn't listen to me. Go check that out. All right. I don't just say this for my health, and I don't just say this for the views. Anyway, I appreciate you guys. All right, so we're going to keep rolling. And going forward, we're going to switch gears and we're going to talk about Grambling because they've been hot. But they got a little competition going with Alcorn, and I know both of these fan bases are frustrated with the other, thinking, man, at one point, y'all have to lose a game. And the other one's saying the same thing back to them. I'm going to talk about this little miniature, heavy, like really heated competition as we continue with Locked On HBCU. Before I get into that, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel, the official sports book of the Locked On Podcast Network. And we have some draft bets that you're going to see. What school is going to have the most players picked? What position is going to be the most drafted in the NFL draft first round? Those things are all going to be there, and it's going to continue once April rolls around. But right now, we're kind of focused on basketball because playoffs are coming around. All-Star break just broke. I hope you made some money during the All-Star break. But if you didn't, that's okay. You still have opportunities to talk about the play-in game, to talk about each playoff series, to talk about who's going to win the West, win the East, win it all. MVP, is it going to be Jokic for a third year in a row? Maybe you have somebody else. Maybe Jason Tatum somehow sneaks his way in there. I don't know. I have a friend who loves Jason Tatum, and I said it for him. But maybe you get Embiid in there. There's a lot of choices, but if you think you have the answers to these questions and you think that you're right, just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more by winning a little bit because you know what you're talking about. And as we continue rolling on today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making us your first listen of the day every day. For your second listen of the day, make sure you're checking out Locked On College Basketball, which is everything you need around the sport in one place. March Madness is around the corner. We are, less than a week at least from March, right? March Madness is here. And if there's any time that you need to be checking out Locked On College Basketball, it is March Madness. Makes the most sense to me. So go ahead and check out my guy, Isaac. You can find it wherever you listen to your podcast, including this app right here that you're listening and or watching me on. But let's talk about Grambling because Grambling is right on the heels of Alcorn. And I'm going to tell you right now, you better not sleep on the Tigers because you have your eyes on the number one seed in the SWAC. Don't do it. Don't make that mistake. And I think I said this either last week or maybe earlier this week. We focus on first place because everybody's aiming for first place. Everybody wants to be first place. Nobody's saying, oh, man, I can't wait to be number 3. So, no, I'm not going to put a heavy emphasis on how to get the number 3 seed or how to be third place. But somebody has to be second. And unfortunately, it's Grambling. And the reason I say unfortunately is because they're performing at the level right now of a number 1 seed or a first place team. I should probably say first place because the SWAC tournament isn't coming up tomorrow. They still have, I think, 3 games left, 3 or 4 games. So this is a situation where this is the second place team. But most times you win 5 games in a row, you're looking at first place like you never going to lose. Meanwhile, first place has won 6 games in a row. They looking at second place like you ain't never going to lose. And these two teams don't face each other again. They don't face each other again. So they're riding out at the high, or they're riding out at the top of their conference really hot. And I don't think I commonly see two teams. Of course, it's happened before, but I don't think commonly I see 2 teams at the top of the conference who are just this hot, this neck and neck, and we have no way to look forward to them playing each other either to really settle this difference at all. That would suck if I was Grambling. If I was Grambling, I would probably feel a little bit of solace because, oh, you know what? We both going strong, but I'm a beat you when we face off. Don't have that opportunity. So I would think at first place, you win 6 in a row, you're probably thinking to yourself, I should have a big lead. I should have stretched it out at least a little bit. Nah, only a 1-game lead. And if you're second place, you're on a 5-game win streak, you probably think, you know what? I should have caught up, at least tied something up by now, right? Nah, you still 1 behind the same way you were when you first started your win streak. And it's crazy. It's crazy to me. But one of the other similarities that they have, they both are really good in close games. Grambling's games aren't as close as Alcorn. So Alcorn is still the king of the close games. The thumbnail is still applicable. That title is still theirs. The crown belongs to them. They're not sharing that. However, them Tigers over there in Louisiana do still execute in close games really well. They're just not 1-score games. They're like 5-7 point type games. That's more so what they get into, and as opposed to the 3-2 1-point games that Alcorn is in, the heavy emphasis on overtime games. They don't have that same look. But when you look at Grambling, one way that they kind of differentiate from Alcorn is statistically they're way more dominant. Alcorn's winning games. And I think that's one of the reasons you look at Coach Bussey, like, man, I'm not happy with how my team is playing. They aren't as statistically dominant as a team like Grambling. Grambling is top 5 in both offense and defense. In defense, they're number 1 by a good margin, by like 3 buckets. I think it's a 6-point lead that they have on the second place team as far as team defense, scoring defense. And they also suffocate the defense or suffocate the opposing offense and limit their field goal percentage better than any other school in the SWAC. Now, the way that they have a great defense is it's an individual effort. It's a team effort. The team's shown in ways like opponent field goal percentage. But then individually, you have 2 players who are top 5 in blocks. You have 1 player who is top 5 in steals. Now, the steals doesn't even show up in the opponent field goal percentage. You're not even getting a shot off at that point. Now, blocks, you're limiting field goal percentage, and it shows there. You have 2 players top 5. But steals, you're not even letting them get an opportunity to get the ball up. Grambling has been suffocating people on defense all year. We laid it out at the beginning of the year, and I'm glad that they stayed constant. Part of me is low-key, especially since now Texas Southern isn't going to get there. And listen, TSU is doing things, but I'm not speaking on TSU because every time I talk about Texas Southern, they want to up and lose a game. So you know what? I'm going to stay peaceful, and I'm going to stay quiet and celebrate in my own home. But Grambling, I secretly hope they win it all because, not win it all, hope TSU still wins it all when we get to the tournament. But regular season, I'm kind of rooting for Grambling because I came out there and said they're the king of the HBCUs at the beginning of the year. And a SWAC championship in the regular season, followed by a TSU SWAC championship in the tournament, would be great for my credibility. You know, they still look good. They still had great victories. They are still showing exactly why I said they were a high-level team and one of the best out at the beginning of the year before conference play even started. They're showing that now. Offensively, defensively, they're efficient on offense. They have everything. Cartier Gordon, Cameron Christian, they both have double figures, both high-scoring players. I think they're both top 15 in the conference. Like, you're looking at 2 players, 2 individuals who are doing great, and Cartier is one of those guys who is top 5 in blocks, so he's an offensive and defensive threat, kind of similar and kind of an embodiment of the Grambling Tigers, and that's why they've been so good going forward. But I almost feel like I can't talk about being good. I can't talk about streaks. I can't talk about success, long-standing success, without talking about the Tuskegee women's basketball team, because I don't care the level. Now, this one I'm talking about, I don't care the level. I don't care the gender. I don't care the conference. Tuskegee women's basketball is the only undefeated team in HBCU basketball, and that goes for all of the metrics that I just laid out. And I'm going to talk about why this is a culmination of a 2-year story as we continue with Locked On HBCU. And that's wrapping up today's episode of Locked On HBCU. I appreciate you for making us your first listen and making it all the way to the end. Shout out to you 2 times. I appreciate it. But I want to talk about Tuskegee because they are undefeated, and this is the culmination of a 2-year journey for them. Now, the SEAC tournament starts on Saturday. There's no way that I couldn't preview the SEAC tournament without talking about the most dominant team in HBCU basketball this year. That is your Tuskegee Golden Tigers. Because 20-0, the only HBCU to have an undefeated conference record. Don't care who you're talking about. They only lost 3 games this year. They're only 23, or they're 23-3. They've been ranked 24 nationally. Kind of feel like that's a little bit low. Got to have, with the level of dominance that they've had, I want to bump that up a little bit, but maybe they're not respecting the competition level that they're facing. Regardless, they're making it to the D2 tournament. I don't doubt that. All they have to do is not get bounced in the first round. Like, that's all they have to do. By being ranked nationally 24th, I think that they're going to make it. Even if they don't get the automatic bid, I think they do make it to the tournament. And Coach Powell, this is the best season that she's had, obviously. This is the first time that the team has been undefeated in conference play in 10 years. So, obviously, this is the best year that she's had. This is her fifth year on the job. But I want to tell you why this is not just 1 year. This is the culmination of a 2-year journey. Of course, she's been here for 5 years and they've been building to this point. But you could really see it bubbling last year. And it's almost impossible to see a undefeated team bubbling the year prior. But just follow me, because they didn't win it all. I understand. I don't even think they were first or second place, but you could see it. Because you're looking at a team that had the Defensive Player of the Year, the Player of the Year. I don't think she got Coach of the Year. She will be Coach of the Year this year. Coach Powell will. You're seeing a team that's building up. They had the best record they had during her tenure. This is a team that you saw on the rise, a team that you knew could be dominant, a team that you knew could be the champions. Of course, I'll never predict somebody to go undefeated. Now, maybe I would have predicted Jackson State to do it this year, but even then, they lost to Misha Williams-Holiday. So I probably would never pick a team to go undefeated, but this is a team that you saw rising. You saw it over 2 years. You saw them build up the individual success. You saw them have the superlative success that teams who are great typically have. And now you see it build up to the overall team success, in one that you might not have fully expected, but you should have at least seen coming. They are the number 1 team on defense, the number 2 team on offense, a dominant defensive team, a dominant offensive team, a all-around good ball club. And there's no way that I could feel okay with myself going into the SEAC tournament and not saying just how quality this team is, just how quality that this season has been. 20-0, 20-0, 20-0. Your Tuskegee women's basketball team, they have been dominant. There was no better word to talk about them, or no better word to describe Tuskegee 2 weeks ago when I talked about them the first time in their undefeated streak than dominant. And now I sit here at the end of the year, at the end of the season, looking into the SEAC tournament, and there's no better word to describe Tuskegee women's basketball than dominant. This hasn't just been a 2-week stretch. It's been a 2-3 month stretch for Tuskegee basketball. We'll see what they do in the tournament, but I can't wait to watch them. And I root for a story, so you know that I'm rooting for them to go 23-0 in the conference play. But we'll see if they're able to do that as we continue covering this cover. And you know me, I'm good for loving a story, so I kind of hope that they go 23-0 just so I can see it happen, just so I can talk about it. Yeah, I ain't gonna lie. Thinking with my media brain right now. I don't have a dog in the race, but I would like to see the story of them going undefeated all year long and throughout the tournament as we continue to cover it on Locked On HBCU. When we come back, I know we're dropping this on Thursday afternoon, so we haven't even got to the semifinals of the CIAA tournament yet. We're going to be talking about the CIAA tournament, the SEAC tournament, and the HBCU Legacy tournament. Listen, or the HBCU Legacy tournament, the HBCU Legacy Bowl. Listen, I might not get it all in one day, but over the next 2-3 days of next week, we will be covering our 3 main events in the HBCU landscape, all going on this week. It's a good time to be an HBCU fan. And I don't just say that because I'm covering the sport, but I do appreciate you for making us your first listen of the day every day so that you can hear me talk about the sport. And for your second listen, check out Locked On College Basketball, because it's everything you need around the sport in one place. Isaac does a great job with the show, so check him out wherever you listen to your podcast. In the meantime, in between time, if you're looking for me, you can find me on Twitter at South Exclusives. Until the next time that we hear each other, family, take care, stay blessed. Peace.